The dawn of the 20th century, two empires locked in a struggle for dominance. In the east, the island nation of Japan, a land of samurai and emperors now rapidly industrializing, a nation with a young, modern navy hungry to prove itself. Across the sea, the vast Russian Empire. Ruled by the Tsar, its ambitions stretched across Asia, a sleeping giant stirring. Russia, a sprawling land of icy plains and endless forests, sought warm water ports that could fuel its expansion, its dreams of power. The Tsar's eyes fell on Manchuria, a region rich in resources, a gateway to Korea, a stepping stone to dominance in the east. But Japan too saw Manchuria as vital to its interests. It needed resources to fuel its growing industries, its burgeoning economy. It saw Russia's ambitions as a direct threat, a challenge to its own aspirations in the region. The stage was set for a clash of titans, a conflict that would shake the world. Manchuria, a land of vast plains and rolling hills, of ancient forests and fertile fields, a land coveted by emperors and czars. For Russia, Manchuria represented more than just resources. It was a crucial link in the Trans-Siberian Railway. This railway, a marvel of engineering, was to connect Moscow to the Pacific. Control over Manchuria meant securing this vital artery. Japan, on the other hand, saw Manchuria as a buffer against Russian expansion, a shield protecting its own security. Korea too became a focal point, a peninsula jutting out from the Asian mainland. It was a strategic prize. Control of Korea meant control of the sea lanes. It meant projecting power in the region. Both empires poured resources into the region. Russia strengthened its military presence, building fortresses and expanding its Pacific fleet. Japan, meanwhile, modernized its army and navy at a feverish pace. The arms race was on, each side watching the other, waiting for the inevitable spark. Japan's rise to power was nothing short of extraordinary. The Meiji Restoration of 1868 had transformed the nation. Once a feudal society, Japan embraced modernization with fervor. Western technology and ideas were eagerly adopted. New industries sprang up, the economy boomed. The Japanese military underwent a radical transformation. New warships based on British and German designs were commissioned. The army adopted modern tactics and weaponry. Conscription created a large, well-trained fighting force. Japan's leaders, determined to avoid the fate of China, which had been carved up by Western powers, were resolved to make Japan a force to be reckoned with. Russia, in contrast, was a vast empire burdened by its own size and inertia. While it possessed immense resources and manpower, its government was inefficient and corrupt. The Tsar, Nicholas II, was an indecisive ruler, easily swayed by his advisors. He underestimated Japan's military strength and resolve, believing that Russia's size and might would ensure victory. As tensions escalated, Japan sought a diplomatic solution. It proposed a sphere of influence agreement, recognizing Russia's interests in Manchuria while safeguarding Japan's own in Korea. But the Tsar's government, confident in its military superiority, dismissed Japan's overtures. They believed that diplomacy was a sign of weakness and that Russia could dictate terms to a smaller, less powerful nation. Negotiations dragged on, each side accusing the other of bad faith. The Japanese, frustrated by Russia's intransigence, prepared for the worst. They knew that war with Russia was a gamble. Russia was a much larger country with a vast army and navy, but Japan was determined to defend its interests, even if it meant going to war with a European power. The Tsar and his advisors, meanwhile, remained convinced of Russia's invincibility. They believed that Japan, a nation they viewed as inferior, would back down rather than risk war. They failed to grasp the determination of the Japanese people, their willingness to fight and die for their nation's honor and interests. On the night of February 8, 1904, the world held its breath. Without a declaration of war, Japanese torpedo boats launched a surprise attack on the Russian fleet at Port Arthur. The attack, swift and devastating, crippled the Russian fleet, igniting the conflict that would become known as the Russo-Japanese War. The world watched in astonishment as Japan, a nation many considered an upstart, struck the first blow against a European power. The attack on Port Arthur shattered the myth of European invincibility. It sent shockwaves through the colonial world, inspiring hope in those who sought to break free from European domination. The war, once a distant possibility, became a brutal reality. From the frozen plains of Manchuria to the stormy waters of the Yellow Sea, the two empires clashed in a struggle for supremacy. The world watched, captivated and horrified as the conflict unfolded. The naval battles of the Russo-Japanese War were some of the largest and most decisive in history. The Battle of the Yellow Sea, fought on August 10, 1904, saw the Japanese fleet, led by Admiral Togo Heihachiro, engage the Russian fleet in a fierce encounter. The battle ended in a strategic victory for Japan, further weakening the Russian Navy's hold on the region. But it was the Battle of Tsushima, fought on May 27th and 28th, 1905, that would become a defining moment in naval history. The Russian Baltic fleet, having sailed halfway around the world, was decimated by the Japanese fleet. The battle was a rout. Japanese gunnery proved far superior, sinking or capturing most of the Russian fleet. The Battle of Tsushima sent shockwaves through the world. It marked the first time in modern history that an Asian power had decisively defeated a European one in a major naval engagement. The victory cemented Japan's status as a major naval power and dealt a crushing blow to Russian prestige. While the naval battles captured the world's attention, a grueling land war raged in Manchuria. The Battle of Mukden, fought in February and March of 1905, was one of the largest land battles ever fought before World War I. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers clashed in a brutal struggle across the frozen plains. Both sides fought with tenacity, enduring unimaginable hardships. The fighting was fierce and bloody, with heavy casualties on both sides. In the end, after weeks of grueling combat, the Japanese emerged victorious, driving the Russians back. The land war in Manchuria was a war of attrition. Both sides dug in, creating elaborate trench systems that foreshadowed the horrors of World War I. The fighting was characterized by artillery duels, infantry assaults, and heavy casualties. The human cost of the conflict was immense. By 1905, Russia, exhausted by war and facing growing unrest at home, was ready for peace. The United States, under President Theodore Roosevelt, mediated the peace negotiations in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. The resulting Treaty of Portsmouth, signed on September 5, 1905, formally ended the Russo-Japanese War. Under the treaty's terms, Russia recognized Japan's dominance in Korea. It also ceded the southern half of Sakhalin Island, Port Arthur, and its associated territories to Japan. Russia also agreed to evacuate Manchuria. The Treaty of Portsmouth marked a turning point in world history. It signaled the rise of Japan as a major power and dealt a severe blow to Russia's ambitions in the East. The treaty also had profound implications for the balance of power in Asia and beyond. The Russo-Japanese War had far-reaching consequences. It shattered the myth of European invincibility, inspiring nationalist movements in Asia and beyond. The war demonstrated the growing military and industrial might of Japan, announcing its arrival as a major power on the world stage. The war also had a profound impact on Russia. The defeat contributed to growing social unrest, culminating in the 1905 revolution. It forced Russia to re-evaluate its foreign policy and focus on internal reforms. The echoes of Tsushima reverberated around the world. It was a stark warning to the Western powers, a sign that the global order was changing. The world had entered a new era, one in which the balance of power was shifting and new players were emerging on the world stage. The Russo-Japanese War, a conflict that began in a remote corner of Asia, had reshaped the world.